Hello, everybody, and welcome back to that Milan podcast. I am Martino Puccio. No Matt Santangelo here today. Unfortunately, he will be back next episode. But today I have a very special guest and friend that I've made on social media, I guess you could say, TikTok specifically, is Alfredo of Azzurri TV. Alfredo, how are you, my man?
Sorry, someone's just come to my door and my dog's barking, but I'll let him bark. Yeah, I'm great actually. I'm just back from Wembley last night. Is that how loud is that actually? Is that
It's okay. It's okay. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, just got back from Wembley late last night. I'm a bit tired today and a bit down.
So,
A bit
okay,
down.
well, so obviously getting back from Italy's 3-1 loss in the Euro qualifiers for those who don't really follow, because there's a lot of Milanisti who are not, but I'm sure they're noticing that. So you're kind of in a similar boat to myself, but obviously England is a much superior power to the US in footy, regardless of what's happened in the past two World Cup results. But how do you approach that as a supporter? Do you have rooting interest in England, or is it just strictly Italy? Or
Yeah, it's always been Italy. The other facets of my family are from Scotland, so whilst I've been brought up in England, my bloodline and heritage is between Italy and Scotland. So when it comes to football, yeah, there's not much
okay,
love for England.
okay, well then there you go. Unfortunate that Wembley performance was not reminiscent of what we saw just in 2021, but nonetheless, we're here to talk about a few things today, a couple of topics. One being Milan versus Juve, which we'll get into later. But this is obviously the biggest story in all of Italian football, and I know you can kind of reset that title almost on a weekly basis, knowing how this league and country works. But this is on a scale of 1 to Calciopoli, it's not the worst scandal that we've seen, considering it's not match fixing. It's players like Nicolo Fagioli and Sandro Tonali illegally betting, specifically on sports, and we'll get into the Tonali side of things. But obviously, you're a massive Juventino. But you're also, I will say, guys, there's a reason why I have Alfredo on the channel as well. Not because his content's just great. He is an objective fan. He is not somebody that is just, it's happened with Milanisti, it's happened with Juventini over the years, where they have a hard time admitting that the club has fell off at a certain level. Obviously, Milan, like around 10 years ago, Juve more so now. But this scandal is massive for a few reasons, just the implications for the national team. But I guess we can get into the Juve side of stuff first. Obviously, the Pogba scandal, where he's going to basically never play for Juve again at this point. I would be stunned if he does. And then Fagioli, who instantly, when you first saw him debut, you saw there was talent there. And then he's really sort of grown into a better player recently. I thought he was off to a good start this season. And then he just ruins everything with this. Cooperating with authorities has helped him with his betting issue. He's obviously admitted to his addiction, and I wouldn't say rat out Sandro Tonali, but that's kind of along the lines of what it is. But basically going to be facing a 7-month suspension, which is just the rest of this season. The implications for him and his career, and what this means for Juve for an already thin and mediocre midfield.
Yeah, I think you've just hit the nail on the head. The midfield coming into this season wasn't particularly strong. Then within the space of 2 weeks, you lose Pogba through a failed drug test. Now we lose Fagioli, and Fagioli has been a very good player for Juventus. I don't think he's a world class talent, but he's a talent. There's ability there. I think he's settled a bit. Whether he's as good as Miretti, he's settled better than Miretti, and he came into the side and kind of made that position his own for a little bit of time. And now I'm not sure. I personally don't think he'll play for Juve again.
Really? Yeah.
I think this stinks of a 7-month ban and then a £5 million sale to Monza. Or I think that's what may happen.
Yeah. But do you agree with that though? Is that something you would want, or you're kind of like, he served his punishment, he's still a serviceable player, and the real conversation now, unfortunately for Juve fans, would be this: is how much of a risk is top four now, because two key midfielders are gone. I don't want it to happen because I'm an Azzurri fan, obviously, and Chiesa is a fine player. I have nothing against him, but if he is having trouble staying fit on a weekly basis, where Juve only play in Serie A, I think the conversation starts to get rolling. Like, are Juve at risk for missing top four? Thankfully, other sides have gotten off to horrific starts, mainly the capital clubs, but that side of you saying if Juve does miss out on top four again, this time for actual on-field performances, is it wise for them to sell? And they're probably going to have to sell with the UEFA agreement, but is that something that you want though? Do you want Fagioli out? I would understand though, if so, because he put the club in a difficult situation like this.
It's hard. I like Fagioli, and it's a hard situation because I think for Tonali as well,
Yeah.
and these players, it's not two ways of thinking can coexist. I can be angry at Tonali and Fagioli and Zaniolo for, being idiotic and doing the wrong things, making mistakes. However, they're also humans. They're fallible, They make mistakes, and a gambling addiction is a real thing. So I feel like, if they've made their mistakes, they're cooperating now, they will serve their time out, and they'll come back and they'll learn from it, and they should be reintegrated. In the case of Fagioli, I'm just not sure whether Juventus would maybe like to keep hold of an asset who has that attached with them, especially, the checkered, shall we say, past of Juve, maybe not wanting to attach their name to match betting and illegal betting.
To be fair to Juve, the second they found out about this situation, they reported it immediately. So it's not, and that's just going with all the clubs involved in this.
Yeah.
Nobody knew, because it's really funny to see, like, oh, Roma and Zaniolo, like, they sold him off to Galatasaray. There were legitimate reasons as to why he was sold. For like his beef with Mourinho, his injury track record. And then and Roma has issues with UEFA. Actually, all three clubs have issues with UEFA at this point. A lot of people still don't understand that Milan's agreement when they were banned from Europe had them not being able to go past 60 million in the red for a financial year. So if they do so, that would risk another ban. So them, with knowledge of the Tonali situation, would have been in deep shit. And with that, even then, they would have to prove that a senior manager was involved in a cover-up, and it is looking highly unlikely that is the case, because Milan's also reasoning for selling Sandro Tonali was a record sale for an Italian, and Tonali himself got his salary tripled. So it's kind of hard to sit there and say to yourself, oh, clearly Milan knew. Listen, people are going to point to that situation, because to kind of switch it over to Tonali now is that why would Milan want to put themselves at a further risk in a situation like this? And I understand the shock and awe of when Tonali was sold in the first place, but I point everybody to the direction of who was sacked prior to his sale, and that was Paolo Maldini, who is the greatest the face of the club in history. So to have that management be willing to sack someone like that after so much success, it is not surprising that they are selling a good, not great player for an absurd amount of money that, again, like I just mentioned, are having financial issues. So it really logistically makes no sense for any of these three clubs involved. But the biggest loser in all of this, Alfredo, is our precious Azzurri, because now what we're really looking at is a key cog in the midfield, because again, we're forgetting that Jorginho and Verratti are no longer pieces in that midfield. So not only are they weaker there, they get substantially weaker with no Tonali, because at this rate, he's missing the Euro. And it doesn't, and he's admitted to all of these doings. So for Italy, if they qualify, because that's still an issue,
that one in there.
big if there, and you can't scoff at any of the fixtures that we have remaining because of Ukraine, and obviously North Macedonia is the bogey team at this point. But yeah, just the impact of the national team now, because this is severe. You're talking about missing another major international tournament, one in which they just won. So how do you think this implication is for the national team? Because it's really just Locatelli and Barella and Fratesi at this point, which isn't bad, but it looks a lot more thin without Tonali.
Yeah, I think Tonali would have been perfect last night, actually, against England. I think we were lacking a kind of more dominant, physically imposing midfielder I mean, Cristante, yeah, he runs around, he's strong, and he's good in the
Eric
air.
Dyer still plays for England,
Yeah,
so
that's true.
managers, they have their favorites. So yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, especially to be fair, I actually think the biggest miss will probably, depending on the ban, will probably be Zaniolo up front, only because we're so thin going forward. And in my opinion, I think in terms of the forwards that Italy have who are able to change the game in a split second, and whatever you may say about Zaniolo and his attitude and his two knees, he does have that ability to change the game in a matter of seconds that El Shaarawy doesn't have, or Solini or Zaccagni, these players who are probably just a level below.
Yeah.
But yeah, Tonali's he's a fantastic footballer. He really is. He's probably the midfielder we have that's just the perfect modern footballer. I think that's why he got his move to the Premier League. I think he's a perfect Premier League player.
Oh, he's an incredible athlete, which many
Yeah.
don't realize. He's one of the fastest players in all of Europe, let alone with Milan. And it was really just always funny to see that. And this is kind of what I was explaining to people when the sale went down, was that just because Milan line up in a double pivot does not mean that's Tonali's best position. When they went on to go and win the Scudetto, Tonali was playing closer to goal. And when he was closer to goal, he was phenomenal. I mean, scoring those goals against Lazio, Verona, even assisting in those matches as well, involved with Leao. Just all of that stuff was just incredible to see. Yeah, were there a lot of, decision-making issues with him where he's picking up unwarranted yellow cards? Yes, that was an issue. And again, just to circle back on the betting part with Tonali, he was involved with it in telling Fagioli to download an illegal betting app. This is what Fagioli said himself. And then again, Tonali has allegedly admitted to saying that he bet on Milan while he was at the club, but not in matches he played in. So he couldn't have impacted the matches himself. It was more about when he was suspended or injured that he was placing bets on the team for them to win. A very similar issue that had happened over here in the United States was someone named Pete Rose, a very famous baseball player, one of the best players of all time, was caught when he was the manager of the club. He was betting on the team to win games, not that he was doing anything to impact what they were doing. Obviously, there's a fine line with it. You're breaking the rules, and it's a very upsetting thing considering who Tonali is for a lot of Milanisti.
Yeah.
And yeah, go ahead.
I think that's exactly it. I was talking to my brother about it today, and what me and yourself and probably everyone saw in Tonali was a consummate professional.
Yeah.
A player who would 110% work ethic. He was that young player who rose through and obviously went to Brescia, but then came back and was the future captain, the future face of the club. And to have this kind of come out I was incredibly shocked that he was one of the names. Zaniolo, I thought.
Yeah, there's a history there. There's a history there of skeptical ethical practices, I guess we could say, is probably the nicest way to put it. Yeah.
But Tonali, I was shocked. I was.
Yeah. I think a lot of people were too, because, again, even circling back with the Milan stuff and people who are kind of just tuning in to this podcast right now strictly for the scandal side of things, Tonali is that player. Then it's honestly well documented at this point on how much he loved the club. There's pictures of him wearing a lot of material from the club, whether it's kits or shirts like yourself that you have on for Juve. There was even a former letter that he wrote to the club saying how he wanted to play for them one day and all that. Personally, I had a tweet out and a lot of people thought I was being harsh. Personally, I do think in a way this does ruin his career, or just like the overall perception of it. I don't think there's any, like, if you're missing a major international tournament because of your sports betting scandal, you're ruining your first year in the Premier League where you get a good start to life over there. How do the Geordies view him now? Like, there's so many different ways that you could look at it. It's just a really disappointing situation. Thankfully, their cooperation with these authorities has limited this ban to a decent amount. The risk for Tonali is up to 3 years, and has been reported is probably going to get worked down to a year because of his cooperation. And with that, it's a devastating blow, I think, more so for obviously Newcastle and the Azzurri, because there's no way to go around it, because Italy is limping to get to an international tournament, and Newcastle, they're very much capable of making the top four. But with multiple competitions this season, it just got a lot harder for them. And that's
Yeah.
something they obviously haven't had to have dealt with in recent years. Impact of Newcastle, you think? Because obviously I know you watch the Premier League as well.
Well,
They still have better depth, but like this is still a massive problem.
he is the depth, though, isn't he?
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
I mean, I've seen kind of mixed reviews from Newcastle fans. I've seen a lot of people saying, he was fantastic in that first game against Aston Villa. Obviously, scored after 15 minutes, but then has kind of plateaued since. I think whatever you say as a Newcastle fan, playing in the Premier League and the Champions League against Milan, PSG, Dortmund, Man City, Arsenal, having a player like Sandro Tonali undoubtedly improves your team and improves the depth that you have. Going from Tonali to suddenly Mr. Longstaff and Willock is a downgrade.
Yeah.
However well you think Tonali started off, it is a downgrade, and it's a huge, huge loss. Though it will strengthen Milan's chances in that group. So
Yeah.
every
Oh,
clad.
massive, massive, massive for the group. I mean, it helps a lot of other sides within the Premier. Again, it's rotation, and England with these competitions have a ton of them, and I believe they already knocked out Manchester City in the Carabao Cup. So they're going further into a competition like
Yeah.
that. There's obviously, when you're kind of starting up this new project, very similar to what Spurs have been, and obviously that's still an issue for Spurs, is about winning a trophy and how much pressure is on Newcastle to win something. Maybe not so much this season. Qualifying for top four last year was just a huge boost for them as a morale as a club. But I think somewhere within the FA Cup, the Carabao Cup, that is something that they might target, because to be honest with you, I think it's a transitional phase for a lot of English clubs at the
Yeah.
moment. I don't think United are quite there with their. I think they're a disaster, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
I
I
don't. I
agree.
don't see much changing. Liverpool still, in my opinion, transitioning. Still a lot of talent there, young, inexperienced, not ready to topple City. I think it's really just City and Arsenal at this point, and especially with this suspension. But yeah, I think overall it's a huge loss for them. Any final thoughts on this kind of situation here before we move on to this weekend's match?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I probably just want to reiterate what I mentioned earlier. I think it's important to look at these issues not one-dimensionally. I think whilst I said it, you can be angry at these players because they have everything. These players have all the money in the world. They have the most beautiful wives you could ever see, but they're humans and they have to get their kicks in some ways. And it's not up to anyone to decide how they do that. And if it's an issue that they obviously all have, and it's just something that needs to be addressed. And you can feel sorry for them
Yes.
whilst also being angry and disappointed in them.
Of course, it's the same thing with like any addict. You feel for them. It's an addiction. It's a disease. You want them to get help, but at the same
Yeah,
time, somebody has to be held accountable for their actions. And if that's not the case here, then I don't know what we're doing. And a lot of people, you can defend Tonali without agreeing with his actions. Simple, because if
yes,
Tonali was still at Milan right now, say Milan, they don't get all that money over the summer. They still wanted to go forward with what they had. They have a much thinner midfield at that point and attack and all that stuff because of the move that funded them. They would have been looking at not having a player for 12 months that would have helped the team. What kind of, and I'm not trying to like say he's not a true Milanista in that sense, but what kind of player and fan would try and put their team in jeopardy like that? That's the issue I have with this, and that's
yeah,
why I'm angry at him. And I think everybody has a legitimate case to be angry at a player like that, just like I'm sure Juventini are angry at Fagioli
yeah,
for the same thing. You're putting your club in a very difficult situation, and a player and a professional wouldn't do something like that.
yeah,
And that's kind of where I'll leave that. So now moving on to this weekend, this is something of massive interest to both of us. Is obviously Milan versus Juve. Milan have really owned this tie in recent years. It's really kind of started turning the second COVID happened and the restart was there with the Saudi Juve team. Milan came back from 2-0 to beat Juve, and honestly felt like a miracle at the time when that happened. It was sort of one of those turning points if you're
yes,
a
it was.
Milanista, especially after the lockdown, how everything went. Obviously, Juve ran away with the league that year, but the following year we started seeing signs of it because Milan finished second and they finished above Juve technically almost every year except for last. But with that, Juve have still shown signs of inconsistency, I would say. The best of Juve that we've seen in Serie A this year looks like a good side. That Udinese match was one of them, I thought, where they looked far more fluid than they did all of last year. And it was fascinating to see with the same manager and largely the same core of players. And then you see something like the Sassuolo match. You see the match against Bologna where they're completely outplayed.
Atalanta, Lecce. We could go on. We
Oh
could
no,
go
well, no, but that's why you're here, my man. Just go on about this. Very Jekyll and Hyde from Juve. Is that just more so about their talent, or just this is just a rough start to the year?
I think the inconsistencies you've seen with Juventus this year are indicative of an inconsistent side. I think individually, you have players who don't perform well every week. Um, starting in midfield, where we're exceptionally thin at the moment. You have Locatelli, who on his day is an absolutely wonderful footballer. But his day comes once every 3 or 4 games. Rabiot, who was outstanding last year when he was in search of that new contract,
Contract
suddenly
year,
has
baby.
toned it down a little bit. Then you have Chiesa, who's not always fit, although he has obviously had a fantastic start to the season.
Yeah.
And the boys at the back, just very, very inconsistent individually. And then having a manager like Allegri who can't input one singular way of playing and raise these players, that's the results you get. At Lazio, we were fantastic. As good a performance I've seen from Juve over the last few years against Lazio. They were outstanding. And we play Lecce a couple of weeks after, and it's like, what am I watching?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of, I was stating that toward maybe before we went on, I forget, but the acceptance of this isn't the team that was winning 9 straight titles, and I think that's kind of difficult for some people to grasp onto because there has been a lot of money invested. They still have the highest wage bill in the league next to
Yep.
Inter, and the expectations are always going to be there. The main issue that we saw from Juve a lot of the time last year was the second you score first on them, they virtually have no chance of winning because when what was happening during that stretch of incredible form last year for right around the World Cup and then afterwards was 1-0 wins. We get our goal, we defend and put up a wall. But if it and another thing in which Juve were so great at and what a lot of teams were scared of Juve back then, right? Even if you got your goal, they were inevitable. Almost every single time they come
Yep.
back, they get the 3 points. It doesn't matter if you were a lower side or if you were a top 6 side. Juve would always come back and win. It just feels like sometimes when you watch them, one, nobody's scared of them. Two, no lead that they hold feels, protected at this point. Sometimes they
Yeah.
do, sometimes not. Really depends on the opponent. But the second, and it was indicative of what you saw in the Champions League. It was one of the I've never seen Juve play so poorly in Europe. I think it was honestly shocking to see that. But again, like you said with Locatelli, and this obviously I've been watching him since he was a teenager at Milan. He hasn't shaken off his biggest fallacies, and that's reckless tackling. And that puts Juve in very difficult situations. I don't think you have a true or great defensive midfielder at this moment in
No,
time. I think Locatelli's purely a box-to-box midfielder.
I
I think expecting more out of him as a defensive midfielder is a reflection of poor management and scouting and knowing what talent you have in front of you. But the one question that I really want to know the answer to is your love for Dusan Vlahovic, if you have any.
Um,
How do you view him as a player? Do you think he is actually worth that amount? I think there were legitimate claims that there was a lack of service for him last year, but also poor finishing and health issues. What do you think has been sort of the main, I don't know, narrative surrounding him that you would support, I guess? Is it a lack of service? Is it his injuries? Is he just maybe not as good as some people might have thought?
yeah, I think there's a bit of everything in there. To be honest, from my own personal perspective, in the summer when there were talks of Vlahovic going and Lukaku coming in, I would have welcomed it. I'm not even a big Lukaku fan, but I would have welcomed it because I think Lukaku would be a better system fit for what Allegri's trying to do. I think it would have just made more sense. Saying that, Vlahovic is obviously a super, super talented striker. I mean, those 2 goals against Lazio were just, I mean, the second goal, the way McKennie, whether McKennie meant that pass, through McKennie's, track history, I'm not sure if he meant it. that looping ball, but to bring it down the way he did, turn and hit that ball into the fight, he's so talented. He's got such pure natural talent.
Yeah.
He has injury issues and he's not been tremendously consistent. However, in his defense, he's also playing in a Juventus side that aren't great in terms of chance creation, clear chance creation. And to be fair to him, those 2 goals he scored against Lazio, he made out of nothing. He probably didn't have no right to score either of those goals, but he did. So I don't know. It's hard to say. I think he's super talented. Maybe he's playing in the wrong team, but I do like it. I think he's a.
I think he is, and it's not even to take a slight at Juve. Chiesa and Vlahovic were 2 perfect players for Milan, in my opinion. Yeah. Prior to the business that just happened, right? If you put Chiesa and Vlahovic currently, like you replace Giroud, you put Chiesa where he would have been on the right side, and you have Leon. Like if Milan were back to their financial dominant way, I don't think stylistically there's a better fit for 2 players. Fortunately for Juve, with these types of players staying within Serie A, considering their financial situation, they had no competition for this. Inter don't need those 2 players. Napoli aren't going to pay up the money for those 2. We know the capital clubs are broke, so that's not even in a discussion at this point. I think it was advantageous for Juve, and I agree with you that it's really just a microcosm of what's happening at the club. Is that right talent, wrong setup, wrong manager for the player, which I want to get into in a second with the manager in Allegri, obviously, because I see a lot of parallels from 10 years ago in Milan to now. But with that, yeah, I think Vlahovic, there's a strong case that it could be his last year at Juve, just because of value and their situation. If it's a mediocre year, you kind of have to start looking in that direction. I think he's super talented, and I think a team would be willing to take up Juve on an offer for him. But we'll see how that goes. So the manager at this point.
The man. I think you can say. I mean, I get a bit lost for words sometimes when I speak about Allegri because I've kind of exhausted the topic. But it's just it doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's not working, and you will not move forward as a club with Allegri in charge at the moment. I think Allegri would be if we had a squad jam-packed full of wonderful footballers, world-class talent. He may very well be great, but we don't. We have players who need a great coach to raise their level, whether it be a McKennie or a Locatelli or a Danilo or a Kostic. We need a manager who can get these players and make them perform at a higher level. Allegri is not the man to do that. And we play poor football. We don't create clear chances. And against lesser teams, we kind of hop over the line and just graze past them. It's not good. It's not good.
And that's kind of the thing too that I see with them anytime I watch them play. Like it's objectively not good football. I know there's a lot of arguments like, look at the results he got. I'm sorry. Why is the team with the highest wage bill, with the highest paid manager, accepting top 4 and just saying, well, injuries. Well, UEFA hates us. Witch hunt, this, that. They have everything they need to compete for the most part. Okay. This isn't like, an incredible Serie A. We're talking about an Inter that's a favorite that lost double-digit games within the league last year with a manager that has issues with rotations and juggling multiple competition. I like Simone Inzaghi just to get that out there, but I'm just saying he's flawed. Same goes for Pioli and Milan. We see the regression from Napoli. There's nothing left to be said there. They're already talking about firing Rudy Garcia, which also story for another day, how that backfired. But with that, I see in the club that's in the crisis that they're in, having nowhere else to turn for someone that's just a familiar name. And I think, unfortunately for Juve, that gets stuck with Allegri because you're kind of like, who do we bring in? The only other option that we're hearing about is Conte. Conte coming into a situation with a team that's in financial despair is a disaster. You never want to do that because that's why he left in the first place when they even were financially healthy. Separate conversation again. right? Because there's so many things to go in with this. I just think, and I find it fascinating to see the leash that Juve are running with here, because it just kind of seems like survive, get to top four, we'll figure it out over the summer. To me, that's not a plan. A plan is when you know that you can get your director in on time, which they did not in Giuntoli. He came in the middle of summer, which sets back everything, whether it's business, selling players, keeping players, making those overall decision. What is Allegri like? Because again, Allegri came in, some of these players were not there when he purchased them, and I personally think there's friction between him and Dusan Vlahovic. They try and keep it professional, but clearly there's a mismatch there.
Of course.
Um, I mean, what do you do? And there's rumors of a club sale. From what I've seen, there have been rumors of it.
Yes.
Wouldn't be
Yeah.
shocking because Agnelli, I would be stunned ever owns or runs the club again like that. Elkan, his cousin, is doing it currently. There's a lot in flux. Would you consider selling major pieces this summer? Top four or not?
Um, Pieces of the club or pieces of in terms
I
of
would I
players?
would say, okay, so I guess Vlahovic would be at the top of the list for this.
Okay.
For players, I would assume McKennie, I'm sure many Juventini would not mind selling him at this point. Um, but yeah, players like that. Or if an insane offer for Chiesa comes in, this isn't Del Piero and Buffon of 2006.
Yeah.
He might extend. I wouldn't be shocked if he stays. But what I'm saying is, like, 60, 70 million euro offer comes in for Federico Chiesa. Are you, Alfredo, saying, yeah, we have to hit the reset button here? I would do it. And the
Do you
same
want
would go for Vlahovic and others.
Well, with Chiesa, I can answer that with my heart or my head. With my head, you'd be silly to not accept that. Um,
Okay. Okay.
with my heart, I wouldn't want to ever see Chiesa leave
I
because
hear you.
I think he's a he's a light in a very dark room at the moment, and he's the only player at Juventus, Vlahovic occasionally, who can get you off your seat regularly, and he makes you kind of have a bit of faith and
Yeah.
believe. And without him, God, I don't know. God, I don't know where we'd be without him this season, especially. But I think a big offer might come in for Vlahovic. I think big European teams would be silly to not see that he does seem unhappy. He's extremely talented, and they could probably get him for about maybe even 50, 60
I
million.
even think because again, the rumor that has been coming out with Chelsea now is that they've set a price for Lukaku to leave this summer or this upcoming summer in June. I think the price is in the high 30-ish million.
Mm,
Ridiculous demands via ADL and Osimhen.
of course.
I think this seems like a fit where Chelsea swoops in. I don't think Real Madrid make this move for a striker, not this striker. Barca, don't see that.
Mm.
I don't even know how they're allowed to like be a club in general, but that's a separate issue. And I'm sure we probably agree on that.
Yeah.
But for this weekend, I guess to kind of get back on track with that, we could talk on the Milan side of things real quick before the injuries and what starting 11s might look like. Teo Hernandez, already 5 yellow cards within the first 8 matches. That just is disappointing, but nail on the head for him and his personality. Mike Magnan, it was a fair red card in that you can't lead
Yeah.
with your knee outside of the box. I had no contest with that. I think 1 game suspension is fair. 2 games might have been a little bit harsh because I don't think the intention was there. I would have understood if it would have been 2. But either way, best goalkeeper in the league and left back in the league, both absent from this, unless you're a DiMarco guy over him. But with that, huge absences for Milan, potentially bigger absences relative to squad with Juve. And again, Samuel Chukwueze, not even an option to play for
Yeah.
Milan, by the way. He picked up an injury with Nigeria. He's going to be out till next international break. So that's a huge one, by the way.
Wow.
So to miss that, that's apparently been reported by Sky. So Christian Pulisic, a lot of minutes on the legs. Don't know if Luca Romero gets a chance with that, but I think he's a little too young for certain matches, especially with PSG, Juve, Napoli. Sorry, it's Juve, PSG, Napoli, PSG for Milan.
Cool.
Very important to remind. So it looks like Vlahovic is going to be on track to play in this one. But Danilo, I think, was the one that has been concretely ruled out. And Chiesa is still potential because
Yeah.
the report on Monday from Di Marzio is saying Highly doubtful for Vlahovic and Chiesa to both play. Yesterday, Vlahovic on track to play. So maybe take it with a grain of salt. We'll operate under the idea of Danilo and Chiesa out. What do you think of Juve's odds if that's the case?
Um, well, I
And
will throw,
Fagioli as well. Basically, we have to mention that. Yeah.
well, I'll throw the question back at you and ask you:
Okay.
would you, if you were a Juventus fan, be confident coming into this game against a Leao, a Giroud, an informed Pulisic with a back three of Gatti, Rugani, and Bremer?
You see, I never rated your defense in the first place. I think Bremer's great individually. The rest, on top
Yeah,
of the wingbacks,
yeah,
I don't see what people see. I think that's just purely an Allegri defensive setup that makes them look better than they are. I think as individuals, it's just Bremer that I like, and the rest are whatever. Gatti is. I think there's just this weird affinity that he's the new Barzagli, which a lot of people
yeah.
have tried to
No,
like. You know what I'm talking
no,
about. Guy came out of like nowhere, wasn't much of a defender, highly rated from teenage years to now.
he was a
It's like
builder 4
guys,
years
don't
ago.
do this. We did this with Saponetta at Milan, where everybody thinks the Italian that you acquire is going to be as great as the Italians you had before. No, that's how you go into a Benta era, just believing in stuff like that. But anyways, no, I would not. I would
No,
not. I would not feel confident enough if I were you guys. But I'm also looking at it from the perspective of like, well, Sportiello makes me feel a lot more calm about myself than Tatarusanu did. And
of
I think he's a
course.
very valuable backup goalkeeper. So I'm not overly worried with that. The service was already lacking for Vlahovic to begin with. If you take away the most dynamic winger outside of Cavara and Leao in the league, that's more of an issue for Milan. And Milan have their full defense outside of Teo. We'll see who they go at left back. It might be Florenzi inverted. We're not really sure just yet. But yeah, I think the difference is the midfield. I don't
Yes,
think Juve can match up with Milan's midfield right now. The
I would
form that
agree.
they're in looks like Loftus-Cheek will be back. If not, Musa's playing fantastic on the right side. Adli or Krunic are supposedly back this weekend. Still good players. And Reinders has been one of the best midfielders in the
Reinders,
whole league this season.
he is. I just want to have like I do want to talk about him because
Oh,
he's.
go for it. That's
I think that
you're
I think
welcome to praise.
there's players who you see and immediately within maybe 5 or 10 minutes you think, oh wow, he's a player.
Yeah.
And I think every time I've watched Reinders this year, I've just been he's so the way he moves with the ball, the way he moves the ball, he's just so elegant and a classy footballer. And yeah, God, I'd love to have a midfielder like that.
Yeah, and it was incredible because we're talking about a player who isn't highly profiled because of his age. Just turned 25, I believe, in
Yeah,
July or August. Obviously playing in the Dutch league, people kind of go back and forth on that, but he was playing Europa League football with AZ Alkmaar and was a teammate of Timo Koopmeiners. Koopmeiners is one of my favorite players outside of the big teams, and instead, I think he's incredible player. But people that I've talked to that are Dutch fans and even watching over there in the league, they're like, we are so surprised no one else tried to come in and scoop up this player.
really.
Because again, I know you're not someone who completely shuns off analytics. I think analytics always require context. I know analytics are supposed to supply context,
Yes,
but in football, it's completely different. You have to apply context within the context because, like, oh, look, this guy got a bunch of yellow cards. Okay, yeah, but what are the yellow cards? Are they reckless yellow cards or are they smart tactical yellow cards like Chiellini on Bukayo Saka, for example, right? Like, just to use those. I think people lack context like that. But Reinders was at the top of almost everything. We're talking about progressive ball carries. We're talking about creating chances within the box. Still a very poor finisher. We've seen that.
yeah,
And with against France as well, I think he had his opportunity over the break. He was amazing for the Netherlands. Yeah, I think this matchup is really down to the midfield. The attack, I don't know what Pioli's going with. I assume it's going to be Giroud for this because he never really kind of turns away from him.
no,
But I think Okafor deserved a chance. But with the way Juve set up, Giroud feels like the better tactical fit for this match.
yeah, I don't think so. I think
Yeah.
maybe Okafor they'd be playing. I mean, whatever you say about those three, Gatti he's a very aggressive defender. So is Bremer. And I think playing Okafor, you might as a 1 against a 3, you might be at risk of him just being a bit kind of just hiding a little bit and not getting much. He's not a fantastic hold-up player.
It's a total of 180 when the players are subbed, like
Yeah.
the profiles. So like
Yeah.
if you're, I think what makes Okafor dangerous with this is you're not worried the entire match of the number 9 running in behind
Yes.
you to get a ball or just elite pressing. But the problem is when that player comes on the pitch and Noah Okafor, you now have to deal with arguably the best one-on-one creator in the league. He probably is, I would say, Leao. I might be biased, but whatever. Talking about one of the best creators in the entire world. 1v1 now, and you have to worry about someone running in behind the defense. And that's if you're in the game, if you're winning, or you're only down by a goal. That's what's really dangerous in this situation. And to me, I think for you guys, a draw would be fantastic.
Oh,
I think anything else, like if you lose, it is what it is at this point. Milan are very difficult. I think it's either them or Inter going to win the title this year, just by the way I see things going. We'll see how Milan do with the group. I think a lot of it's contingent upon the Champions League group for them. But would you agree with that? Would you be over the moon with not over the moon with a draw, but you would be happy or satisfied with a draw in this instance?
Yeah, I think the way, I mean, not only I think contextualizing the kind of environment at Juventus and the things that the club have gone through over the last 2 or 3 weeks. Also, I think add that to just a thin squad, injuries, and the way we've been playing of late. I think a draw would be a fantastic result. And that's me being realistic. I don't want people to think, oh yeah, a fantastic result, a draw. Like it's not.
I think it always matters in context.
Oh.
I think you're playing away at San Siro. You're missing key players.
Yeah.
The club. I know you can kind of say this because it just goes further back to even last November. The club's in a crisis.
Yeah.
It's a mess. It's a mess almost every single time. And we didn't even mention Giuntoli's comments recently that shows again, I think it's just shows how chaotic Serie A is, that a director of the biggest club in Italy, and I say in Italy, I think Milan worldwide, just to be nice here, but in Italy, the director is saying sexist shit. Okay, that's probably the nicest way I could put it.
Yeah, yeah.
He's being an asshole. With that, you're just like, when does it stop? As a Juve fan, is that kind of where you guys are at with this?
Yeah, it just seems to be a bit of a never-ending cycle of shit, to be honest. The club don't seem to know where they're going and what they want to do. I think ultimately this is the wider issue is that I don't think they know what their plan is. I don't know where they're wanting to go, what they want to do in terms of buying players, but you don't. How are you supposed to know what you want to do in buying players when Allegri is your coach? You bring in Giuntoli, who's a specialist in finding little gems around Europe here and there. Well, specialist.
Yeah. He's very hit or miss, but the hits are good. Yeah.
But you bring in him. Why? To play a certain type of football? To play? I don't think the club knows where they want to go, and I think maybe that's because they are so restricted financially, and they cannot possibly look long term because they have to look short term. The short term of making the Champions League is so important financially that it's maybe quite difficult for them.
Missing it again is a disaster.
It's going to be rough. If
I don't see how. I think they do make it just because they play once a week, and I don't think the competition is sort of fierce. I think they've done enough so far. I think after everything that just happened to them, now it gets tougher. Here's the truer test. Pogba looked solid when he actually stepped on the pitch. I think that's probably a more upsetting part. I think it was a hockey assist or an assist on that one match. I forget who they were playing. But to have that, and then Fagioli really did look like he took a step up in his game. He just looks like it's just a lot more confident. I played in more matches for a club like this, and Like I get it. I'm never gonna feel bad for Juve like that, but I'm just trying to like put it in the perspective of how you view this, because Milan were the same situation. You spend 250 million over a summer. You haven't made it into Europe in years. Even when they did, it was Europa League with Montella. But the level of money where you invest in wages and transfer fees and expectations, you have to make top four. You need to bring in Champions League money, because the money brought in by the Champions League does not even compare to what you get in Europa League. And a club like Juve, publicly traded, operating in a space like that, it could backfire, because again, it's investors involved in this. And they're not going to sit there saying to themselves, well, if we just keep on Vlahovic one more year, it's like, no, we have a 70 million euro asset at best, right? We'll just say that. We have to sell off now. Your expectation for this, do you think Juve finish top four this season?
I think for now, I would say yes. Only because, again, looking a bit wider, I think Lazio are weaker than they were last season, and they've also got the Champions League to deal with. Roma just look like a bit of a mess.
Awful side.
And I think maybe just more so to do with the weakness of other teams, we may get top four.
I think across the league, everybody's dropped off this year for the most part. I just, like even looking at Udinese, who were really a tough squad last year, respectable, they do not look like that threatening bogey type of team to steal the points. Sassuolo is always going to do this. That's just, I think they're always more or less the same. But you're right. Like Fiorentina, to me, I think I've said this prior to the season starting. I think they finish above Roma. I think they might be a threat.
I think they could be. I think it depends how Europe goes. They still lack any kind of real goal scoring number 9. I think Nzola is not the and Beltran looks
it just not ready. You're making a leap from South America to regardless of league and all that. Yeah. Like it's just not to be harsh. It's just I think Fiorentina have done a really nice job retooling their squad. I think their business and the way they go about things is very wise as opposed to some of their clubs. Atalanta, always a threat. I think probably the biggest threat to Juve that I see as of right now. Lazio, listen, Sarri bitches and moans about the schedule that he agreed to manage. This guy's got worked in excuses that I just really don't want to hear from him. And then same goes for Mourinho and Roma. I just think that is a side that has to largely be carried by a lot of ifs, and a squad that has that many ifs, and those ifs are injury-prone players.
Very injury-prone players.
Like you replace one injury-prone player in Nicolo Zaniolo, and then you have like 3 more take his place. I find it very difficult, but I think in that sense, Juve are in a positive spot. Predictions for this match, Alfredo.
Again, this is a heart or head question, isn't it? I think realistically, I'm not confident. I'll be honest. Realistically, however, we do tend to raise our game against better sides, and sometimes we are a bit more dangerous against better sides who retain the ball and offer in a bit more space in behind. So, as indecisive as I am, I'm going to go down the middle and take a 1-1 draw.
1-1 draw. Okay, so you're obviously going to be very happy with that. For me, I think it's actually going to be 2-0 Milan. If Chiesa doesn't play, especially Chiesa not playing, which is kind of obviously the whole caveat to this. It's difficult to say, like 5 days out or whatever it is, 4 days. If Chiesa were to be playing full with Vlahovic, I think it looks like Danilo is out of all these players. I think there is a chance for a draw, but the way Milan have been playing, it's tough because Pioli ahead of a Champions League match, Milan always falter. We saw that last season. I think and in the situation that they're in, they have not scored a goal in the Champions League and they're facing PSG back to back. You have to pull a rabbit out of your hat at that point. For Milan, I think they get a result here, and I think it ends up being a win because there's a lot more to be played for the rest of the season. But picking up 3 points at home against a Juve side that is depleted and in a crisis is a must-have. But again, I would not be shocked by a draw. I don't see Milan losing this. I'd be very stunned by a loss. But a draw kind of feels like if it were to go Juve's way, it would be that. And yeah, so that's the prediction for the match. I know we're around 50 minutes or so, but I just want to start talking about like football content and your stuff before I let you head out. Okay, obviously your name is Azuri TV on TikTok. You've amassed a very big following. You and I have been following each other. Actually, it goes by so fast. It's probably almost got to be like 2 years at this point. That's how
Yeah,
crazy it's gone by. I had you on my old account that got banned because I showed some
yes.
video of Giroud taking his shirt off and and they struck me down. So I had to delete that one. But anyways, you do a great job of being very objective about almost every single topic that comes within Serie A, the national team, obviously, within the name itself. What made you want to get started with content creation, and what has been something that has helped you so much to grow your channel? Because you do such a great job in terms of timeliness and getting videos up on time and being very consistent, which a lot of people ask me questions about and how to grow on social media. Would you agree it's sort of those things? And what has been something that you've done that particularly has helped you?
Yeah, I think it was always something that was just around in my life. My Sundays would be spent with my dad and my uncle and my brothers round Nonno's dinner table, speaking about whoever had played the night before, whether Del Piero was good enough to still be playing for Italy, or how much of a moron Cassano is, or whatever the subject matter may be. And I
Yeah.
feel like my kind of page was just a bit of a continuation of that. I remember the first time I actually sat down to try and make a video was after we lost to Macedonia, but I couldn't actually muster
Really?
the
That's not that
energy.
long ago, but it is. Yeah.
I just couldn't muster it to get it out. And then
Yeah.
maybe like a month or so later, I think I'd done an end of season Serie A, like team of the year or something. It's just something that always been passionate about and enjoy talking to other people about. I think that's more it. It's just something that if you're passionate and kind of charismatic, and people can see that it's a true love and a true passion, they buy into it. I guess I think because that's what you do when you follow someone. You buy into it. You enjoy what they're putting out, and
All
I
right, try to pull up TikTok to get it for you. Yeah, but go ahead. But yes, with that here, let me just mute the site. That'll be better. Nice job, dummy. So anyways, yeah, I mean, listen, the content is great. There's always stuff like that. I know you did your signings of the summer. You always do kind of stuff like that. Like,
yeah,
regardless of takes, I know something obviously a big topic at that time was Charles de Ketelare and whether or not if he was a bust or it was too soon to call him that. I think it was around this time last year, honestly,
yeah,
because that's when the struggle started to transpire for him. But just overall, there's not a big English speaking community in terms of videos being made for Serie A and Calcio. A lot
yeah.
of people kind of don't get that. Some of the bigger accounts on TikTok, I would say, or yourself, the guy. Oh my god, the kid is hilarious. You've had
Luca,
him on before. He's the
the
Juve fan, correct?
Juventus, Luca, yeah.
He is. I think he's one of the. He might be the biggest Calcio content creator
He's got
on
huge following,
on
huge,
on TikTok for sure. I think what are you up towards now? Almost 20,000
nearly
followers or
20, I think, yeah.
yeah, so like incredible. I don't post there enough and I'm old, man. I'm 28. Like in TikTok years, it's ancient. I know you're a bit younger than myself, but I just think you're a great example of somebody who has been consistent, been fair, respectful to other people on the platforms. I'm more of a if you say something to me, I'm gonna say something back to you. You're not like that. You do a more classy way. And I just think I just wanted to share the platform that you give yourself and expose people to more content. Because, guys, it's not a big deal if you follow someone that supports Juve. Alfredo is not one of those people who I would say is so delved in to the side that they root for that almost anytime Milan does something, he's going to shit on them. I will say that is categorically untrue. I'm not saying anyone has said that, but just overall to let the perception go because a lot of people have their guard up when they see the Juve logo
Naturally.
and all that stuff. And also you've started posting more stuff on YouTube as well, and your account on Twitter is something that I'll post in the description as well. All this stuff to social media, you guys are going to be able to go and check out. Any other interesting projects or videos that you're going to be coming out with soon that people should be on the lookout for that you would like people to know about?
Well, I may be going over to Leverkusen when Italy play Ukraine in the final Um,
Oh my goodness. That's
so
November 20th, right? Or
20th,
no?
yeah, the Monday, I think.
Wow.
So that
Impressive.
that may be a very exciting trip. Might be a
Yeah,
joyful
and
one.
and you've done vlogs as well because I've known you've gone to see Juve a couple times. I know you went to a
Yeah.
Napoli match. I'm not sure if you went to San Siro just yet, or if you had a video, you might have. But just all that sort of stuff is unique, guys. It's in English. You're not going to find much content like that. And you also post these on Instagram as well. I don't really check reels as much as I
No,
used to.
I do when I can. If it crosses over well, then
Okay,
I'll
well
stick
there
it.
you go. But
But
again, TikTok, Azzurri TV. Anything else, Alfredo, before we head out that I might have forgotten or that you want to discuss?
um, no, just give a Juve fan a follow. I'm impartial. I give people their flowers. I give people their flowers when they deserve them. You
I mean,
know.
yeah, you were just praising Reinders, so he's not that kind of guy. Guys, I would never bring someone on the channel or anything like that. That would, I don't know, be a jackass. You're not. We appreciate your work. We thank you so much for coming on for this podcast. Again, guys, if you have not subscribed already, it's That Milan Podcast on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. We obviously posted clips on all the social media, the YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, TikTok. I'm just one of those people that posts the same video on all three platforms every time. Sometimes on Twitter, obviously. But yeah, go and follow Alfredo. Thank you so much, my man, for taking time out of your
Yeah,
day
thank
to
you for
do
having
this.
me.
I know. Yeah, of course. I know it's dinner time. I don't want to take it away from you. We already went over what we were supposed to. But yeah, guys, like, comment, subscribe, your thoughts on Alfredo, and please go and follow him everywhere on his channel. So take care, guys.